Hello viewers, thank you for joining me. This was one of those series I picked up on a whim. I'd never heard of it before, but nothing is more appealing to me than a box set, a chance to collect the whole thing at once. Once I started it, it reminded me quite a bit of Children of the Sea, at least in the sense that I was not prepared for how complex a story I'd gotten myself into. But let's start at the beginning. We're introduced to a girl named Gaku, who's pretty headstrong and stubborn, but perfectly likable too. In middle school, she befriends a girl named Yukari, who's very sweet, but also a little strange. The world looks very different through Yukari's purple eyes. Human beings all look like robots to her. At first, I thought they were going for some kind of metaphor here, but it quickly becomes clear that she means it literally. Yukari does her best to fit in, but never quite manages it. Everyone knows she's a little weird, but her classmates are generally pretty fond of her. She's definitely seeing something real with those eyes, because Yukari's also gotten a reputation for being able to see a person's hidden talents. She claims the class president, for example, has special sensors, and that's why her weather predictions are always accurate. The class track star only tried out for the team on Yukari's suggestion, because of the thrusters on her legs. It's an odd but comfortable sort of balance she maintains at school, with all but one of her classmates. Gaku clashes early on with a girl named Nanami, who seems to hate Yukari and spends all her spare time bullying her, but Yukari is insistent that she doesn't want these two to fight. Yukari and Nanami used to be close. Gaku may not know what happened to their friendship, but she can't deny that Nanami does seem to understand Yukari's abilities better than just about anyone else. It brings them to a stalemate of sorts, but Gaku draws the line when Nanami tries to tell her she'd be better off without Yukari's friendship, refusing to hear it. It's not long before Gaku gets a taste of what was behind that warning, though, when she's kidnapped by a serial killer trying to lure Yukari out. And Yukari does come to her rescue, along with her army of model robots who come to life to fend off the killer, and then Yukari uses pieces of a broken cell phone to reattach the arm Gaku had cut off, leaving it looking like a regular arm, but still functioning like a cell phone. And at one point, I would have told you this is where the story got crazy, but we're not even there yet. A couple things shift after this. For one, this was the big test of Gaku and Yukari's friendship. Yukari's prepared for her to run screaming in the other direction, but she really shouldn't be surprised when Gaku takes the whole incident in stride and still wants to be her friend. After all, Gaku's special talent, deduced from her unique makeup of parts, was adaptability. I have to say, I was really loving the story at this point. Qualia the Purple was hitting all the right notes for me. There's nothing I love quite like a "I'll burn down the world for you" friendship story. Though it should be noted that, right from the beginning, when their first meeting starts with an accidental kiss, it's pretty clear that this friendship is going to morph into something else eventually. It's really a tale of accepting others' differences, that you don't have to understand someone exactly to love them. And that's great, it's beautiful. That simple message stays strong throughout the rest of the series, but everything else gets a lot more complicated. Now that Gaku knows the full extent of her abilities, Yukari tells her what exactly went down with Nanami when they were kids. The two were playing on an old jungle gym that collapsed under them. The accident left Nanami's body so broken that she wouldn't have survived if Yukari hadn't pieced her back together using the metal bars of the jungle gym. Unlike Gaku, who experienced the surgery through a bit of a haze because she'd been drugged, Nanami was awake and aware for the whole thing. So while I can't condone the bullying, it is definitely understandable that she'd be traumatized by the experience. The incident bridges a little more of the gap between Nanami and Gaku, who also start spending time together. Gaku was pretty easy to like from the start, easygoing but protective. Nanami's a little more complicated, but I did grow to like her too. She's just a bit stuck in her own head. Gaku quickly deduces that she misses Yukari's friendship. The bullying is a misguided, very middle school way to remain a part of her life. She just can't accept her impromptu modifications as easily as Gaku does. In a way, her more childish reactions are a welcome balance to her character, because, left to her own devices, Nanami's begun obsessing over and researching the possible physics behind it all, making it very easy to forget that they are supposed to be just junior high students. A lot of it goes over Gaku's head at first, but through this new friendship, Nanami introduces her to topics like quantum mechanics, different philosophies behind what determines reality, and parallel worlds. It's not entirely unbelievable that their minds would develop this way. Nothing seems impossible when you've experienced what they have. But nothing comes of all this talk until a young girl named Alice transfers into their class. Hailed as a genius who already has multiple college degrees, it might seem a little strange that she'd enroll in a middle school, but Alice is here on a mission. She immediately latches on to Yukari and does her best to isolate her from her other friendships. She reveals she's part of an organization called Jaunt that collects and nurtures kids like Yukari who have special abilities. Alice herself has eyes that allow her to instantly solve complex mathematical equations. The scientists are hoping it will allow her to solve some of the mysteries behind the creation of the universe. Despite her efforts, Alice can't get Yukari to ditch her friends, so she approaches Gaku instead. She does make a very compelling argument. She tells Gaku it's selfish to keep Yukari here with her. Not just because her talents aren't being nurtured to their full potential, but because she's already had a taste of what it looks like when someone less noble sets their sights on Yukari. She doesn't have the power or the resources to protect Yukari like Jaunt could. Ultimately, it's this argument that leads to Gaku telling Yukari that maybe it is worth checking out, at least for one semester. So Yukari goes back to America with Alice, and, like most long-distance friendships at that age, she and Gaku slowly fall out of touch. Gaku's found some interesting new companions to keep the loneliness at bay, though. One night, she received a call on her hand phone and was shocked to recognize her own voice on the other end. They only had to talk for a minute before all of this Gaku's memories appeared in her head, and so Gaku proves that the parallel worlds theory, at least, is reality. It becomes a daily routine to spend her evenings connecting with her other selves, and she never gets the same Gaku twice. For a while, this is all lighthearted fun, until she gets the news that Yukari was killed during some kind of experiment. Alice comes back to Japan for the funeral, but runs away as soon as she sees Gaku, and Jaunt is being as shady as possible about covering up what really happened. So, rather than process her grief, Gaku fixates on finding the truth and getting revenge. And I know a lot happened leading up to this point, but Yukari's death is where the story really takes off. Through communing with her other selves, Gaku manages to puzzle out a way to use her knowledge of parallel worlds to change not just her future, but her past. And she sets out to craft a world where she can save her friend, quickly leading to questions of whether fate exists as well, because she seems to fail no matter what she changes. Now, I definitely want to talk about the second half of this story, but I don't plan on spoiling too much more. I try to cut myself off around the halfway point. I just have a way of being drawn to stories where I have to give you more than the bare basics of the premise, or else I wouldn't really be able to talk about it at all. Complex is definitely a word I'd use to describe this one, and while I'm sure I didn't fully absorb all their talk of philosophical and scientific principles, I feel like I got the important ones, and their explanations were plausible enough to my mind. It's the kind of tale that likes to test the boundaries of what's considered impossible. In that sense, it felt a little similar to Occultic 9. I love seeing stories that try to blend mystical, supernatural things with scientific explanations. If I had to sum up Qualia the Purple simply, I'd say it's a little bit of a nonsensical mindfuck, but also a little bit of a really intelligent story, tackling topics another writer might not be confident enough to try to break down and explore. While I'm not an expert on any of these things myself, for the most part, I think it worked. I'd say it worked largely because Gaku, our vessel for this story, was generally pretty ordinary and relatable, even when she was gaining world-breaking levels of power. I found Gaku to be a fairly empowering character, too. She quickly decides she's going to embody Fermat's principle, which states that a ray of light will always take the shortest, and thus most direct path from one point to another. She becomes entirely single-minded in her quest to rescue Yukari. This mindset is accompanied by quite a bit of doom and gloom hindsight narration about how this also set her down the path to destroying herself, but, light spoilers, it does all work out in the end in a way that's at least suggestive of a happy ending, so those moments don't hold a ton of weight looking back on the series. I do have to say that the storytelling was a lot stronger in the first half. Not in the sense that the plot ran away from them or anything, it feels like everything played out exactly the way it was meant to from the beginning, but once Gaku starts down this path of finding just the right parallel world, we start to see long stretches told in the passive voice, with Gaku just summarizing a bunch of the worlds where all her efforts failed. There are a couple really good scenes where a bunch of Gakus sit down together to brainstorm their next move, and I appreciate that there wasn't possibly the time to go through all those failed worlds in person. That would have led to a different kind of storytelling complaint, but the way it plays out did distance me from the story at times, took me out of the experience. So some of the middle was a little dry, but that's really my only complaint. I liked this one a lot. The characters were all interesting and mostly likable, the artwork was great. The conclusion she comes to about why she kept failing was a very satisfying power of friendship type realization. It was basically exactly the answer I'd been rooting for, so that always feels good. And to top it all off, it's pretty short. I think it was 3 volumes originally, but I found it sold as one big omnibus collection. If you like your stories a little complicated, I definitely suggest giving this one a try. Thank you for watching.